Today, we're diving deep into one of the most polarizing, powerful, and, let's be honest, absolutely infuriating strategies in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! The Floodgate. You know, it's that style of play that doesn't win with these huge, flashy combos or overwhelming power. Nope. It wins with one simple, brutal concept. Just telling your opponent, no. If you've ever sat down at a tournament table, you know these three words. Draw the out. It's the desperate prayer of a player whose entire game plan has just been completely shut down. Your hand is full of gas, your mind is racing with all the combo lines you've practiced, but none of it matters, because you're locked. Your only hope is that the very next card you pull off the top of your deck is the one specific key that can break the chains. And you know what? That feeling? It's not an accident. This high-stakes, top-deck scenario is exactly what a Floodgate deck is built to do from the very first turn. It's a strategy that literally weaponizes helplessness. It turns a duel from this dynamic back and forth into a super tense game of chance. So, how does this even work, and why on earth is it so effective?
Okay, let's get into it. In this explainer, we're going to break it all down. First up, what exactly is a floodgate, and how does it manage to turn your perfectly good hand into a pile of unplayable cardboard? Then we're going to get inside the mind of a floodgate player. What's the philosophy behind this whole restrictive strategy? After that, I'm going to give you a 7-step guide to building your very own competitive lock. From there, we'll dive into the big debate. Are floodgates a skillful strategy, or are they just a flaw in the game's design? And finally, we'll ask the ultimate question. Are these cards a necessary evil that actually keeps the game balanced?
All right, so let's start with the absolute basics. Picture this. You're sitting across from your opponent, they set a card, pass turn, and then they flip a single trap. And just like that, your hand of powerful monsters and spells might as well be blank. What just happened? Well, we're about to pull back the curtain on this often mysterious and, pretty frustrating strategy. So here it is, the community-accepted definition. A floodgate is any card with a continuous effect that just fundamentally changes the rules of the game. It might say something like, hey, you can't special summon, which is, a core mechanic that lets you swarm the board. Or maybe it's, you can only control one type of monster. Now here's the trick. While they often affect both players, the person who flipped it has built their entire deck to be immune to its effect. It's the heart and soul of what some people call an anti-game strategy. You're basically winning by stopping the game from being played the way it's supposed to be.
And this, right here, this perfectly illustrates the central conflict of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! On one side, you've got the combo player. They've spent hours practicing these wild, intricate sequences, using 10, maybe even more cards to build this unbreakable board of powerful monsters with multiple interruptions. It's like a symphony of strategic execution. And on the other side, one continuous trap card gets flipped. One activation, and that entire symphony just falls silent. This incredible difference in power, this asymmetry, is really the heart of the whole debate. To a control player, this is the ultimate move, finding that one card that just invalidates an opponent's entire deck. It's beautiful, but to a combo player, it just feels like an unfair shortcut. It's like you sidestepped all the skill it takes to pilot a complex strategy. And this isn't a new argument, by the way. This is a philosophical divide that's as old as the game itself. So how does this one card turn into a whole winning strategy? I mean, flipping a floodgate isn't just some random act of disruption. It is the cornerstone of a very deliberate philosophy, a whole school of thought dedicated to winning not by outplaying your opponent, but by systematically taking away their ability to play at all. Yeah, understanding these principles is absolutely crucial. The goal is simple. Stop your opponent cold. Turn their hand of powerful engine pieces into totally dead cards. And you do this through continuous effects that attack the very mechanics that modern decks absolutely rely on. The impact, as we've already talked about, is that nail-biting draw-the-out game state. And the core principle behind it all? These decks trade the explosive speed of combo decks for a slow, grinding inevitability. See, once the lock is set up, the win is no longer a question of if, but when.
Now, what's really cool is seeing this philosophy in action. These aren't just theories. These are actual meta-defining decks. Just look at these examples. Mono-attribute decks, they use Goes and Match, a card that says you can only control one attribute. This does absolutely nothing to them, but it completely cripples a deck that uses light, dark, and water monsters. Then you have True Draco, who masterfully use cards like Skill Drain, which negates all monster effects on the field, by tributing their own traps for value, turning a downside into a strength.
Guru Control is a masterclass in attrition, using monsters that can flip themselves face down to dodge their own floodgates, making them totally one-sided. And then there's Runic Stun, which locks you down with cards like There Can Be Only One, and wins by a totally different method, just running you out of cards in your deck. All right, so now we understand the what and the why, but how do you actually build a deck like this so it works? It's not as simple as just cramming every powerful stun card you own into a deck. There's a method to the madness, a framework that competitive players use to build a Floodgate package that consistently wins games instead of just, bricking their own hand. And here it is, the complete 7-step framework. We're going to walk through these, but from a high level, it all starts with understanding your own deck's strengths and weaknesses. Then you analyze the meta, what everyone else is playing, to find its weak points. From there, you choose the right type of floodgates, build your package with a very specific ratio, make sure you can still actually win the game, test that you aren't hurting yourself, and finally, build a side deck to protect your whole strategy. Let's break it down. Okay, let's jump ahead to step 3, because this is a huge decision point. Every floodgate basically falls into one of these 4 categories. Category A cards. These are the heavy hitters. They warp the fundamental rules of the game itself, like skill drain, just turning off all monster effects. Category B targets the graveyard, which for most modern decks is basically a second hand. Category C puts the floodgate effect right onto a monster's body, which can be both a strength and a weakness. And finally, Category D are your silver bullets, the specific tools you bring in from the side deck for games 2 and 3. A winning build will pick a primary category that works with their deck and a secondary one to cover its weaknesses. So how many do you actually play? Well, this brings us to the competitive formula, the 3-3-3 rule. This creates a 9-card package, which is pretty much the sweet spot for consistency. You run 3 copies of your main floodgate, the one your deck is built to abuse. Then 3 copies of a secondary floodgate that covers different threats. And finally, 3 flex spots. These could be tech cards for whatever's popular right now, or even a third type of floodgate. This ratio gives you a really high chance of opening a lock without stuffing your hand with so many that you can't even play, a situation players call bricking. The last 3 steps are all about refinement. Step 5 is so important. A lock doesn't win you the game, it just stops you from losing. You still need a way to actually win, whether it's a big boss monster like Eldritch or just slowly chipping away with damage. Step 6 is the golden rule. If a floodgate hurts you, even a little, cut it. It has to be one-sided, no exceptions. And finally, step 7 is all about your side deck. It's not there to change your strategy, it's there to protect it, with cards like Solemn Judgment or to help you break an opponent's board if you get stuck going second. So now that we understand the pretty intricate process of building a successful floodgate strategy, we have to face the big controversy. We just walked through a methodical 7-step process that requires deep knowledge of your deck and the metagame. But does that make it a healthy strategy? Is this a legitimate show of skill, or is it a fundamental design problem that kind of undermines what makes Yu-Gi-Oh fun? This is the core argument against them, right here. Critics say that floodgates just invalidate player skill. All that knowledge of combo lines, all your resource management, all that careful deck building, it all becomes totally irrelevant when you literally cannot play your cards. The duel gets boiled down to a simple coin flip. Did you happen to draw your 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster? If yes, you might have a shot. If no, you lose. And that can create an incredibly frustrating, non-interactive experience. And look, this is not a new problem. The impact of these cards is huge and long-standing. Across the entire history of the game, more than 15 different powerful floodgate cards have seriously shaped the competitive meta. From the early days of trap-heavy formats where a card like Royal Decree could just end games, to the infamous Dragon Ruler format dominated by the now-banned Vanity's Emptiness, these cards have defined entire eras. They've forced players to adapt or just get locked out of the game. This isn't just some recent trend, it's a fundamental part of Yu-Gi-Oh's competitive DNA. And the people who make the game? Oh, they are very aware of their power. Right now, 2 of the most popular floodgates, Goes and Match and There Can Be Only One, are limited. That means you can only play 1 copy per deck instead of the usual 3. That's a huge move by Konami. It shows they know how much these cards can warp the meta. By limiting them, they aren't banning the strategy, but they are making it way less consistent. It's a clear example of that balancing act between allowing different strategies and making sure the game is actually fun and interactive to play. And that leads to the most important point. It often only takes 1. Just think about that. A combo player might spend several minutes and a dozen cards to build their board, making all these perfect plays, only for a single, well-timed floodgate to undo all of that effort in an instant. Because these effects are continuous and because decks are often built to search for them,
Resolving just one copy of a card like Skill Drain can be enough to completely define and win an entire duel all on its own. That is the incredible power, and for a lot of people, the incredible frustration of Floodgates.
So, this all leads us to our final section. Looking ahead, what's the role of these cards in the game's future? Are they a relic of bad design that should just be phased out, or do they serve a vital purpose? Are they maybe a necessary evil? Now, before we go any further, it's really important to look at the other side. These strategies are far from unbeatable. They have very clear exploitable weaknesses. They absolutely fold to the right kind of spell and trap removal, which is why good players always have cards like Cosmic Cyclone in their side deck. They can draw the wrong half of their deck, all floodgates but no monster to win with. They're also much, much weaker going second against a combo board that's already set up. And sometimes, a floodgate that destroys one deck is completely useless against another. A good player has to prepare for these decks. Beating the meta means being ready to beat floodgates. And this really brings us to the bigger picture. The fact that floodgates are still around isn't an oversight. It reflects a really delicate design balance. In a game where combo decks can summon dozens of times in one turn, floodgates act as a natural check, a kind of safety valve. They punish greedy decks that don't run enough removal. From a game design perspective, they help make sure that no single strategy, especially combo, can get so powerful that it pushes every other playstyle out of the game. It's this constant evolving dance, where these control cards play a controversial but pretty important role. So we end with the same question we started with. Whether you see them as a brilliant expression of strategic control or just a frustrating design flaw, floodgates demand your respect and preparation. They force us to ask what competition in a card game is really all about. And so I'll leave you with this to think about. Is a strategy that's designed to stop the game from being played a valid way to play it?